I still remember the exact moment I realized I had become nothing more than an ATM machine to my own family. It was a Thursday evening in late October when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother that simply read, "Family emergency. Come to the house immediately. Don't be late." My stomach churned as I drove through the familiar streets of the upscale neighborhood where I grew up, each turn bringing back memories I had learned to compartmentalize. Maple Avenue with its towering oak trees, their leaves now painted in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Birch Lane, where I used to ride my bike as a child, always alone because Brianna was too young and my parents were too busy. The neighborhood had been built in the 1950s, all stately homes with perfect lawns and families that looked picture perfect from the outside. I had learned early that what appeared perfect on the outside could be rotting from within. My parents' house came into view, and I felt my chest tighten. The pristine colonial stood like a monument to old money and older expectations. 3 stories of white-painted brick with black shutters that my mother had insisted on replacing every 5 years to maintain appearances. The lawn was immaculate, every blade of grass, the exact same height, every hedge trimmed into geometric precision. My father paid a landscaping service an obscene amount of money to maintain that perfection. God forbid the neighbors see a dandelion or an overgrown bush. What would they think? The white picket fence that surrounded the property had always struck me as ironic. It was supposed to represent the American dream, wholesome family values, safety, and warmth. But to me, it had always felt more like a barrier, a way to keep the world out and the family dysfunction contained within. How many times had I stood on the other side of that fence as a teenager, dreading going inside? How many times had I sat in my car in this very driveway, giving myself a pep talk before facing whatever criticism or demand awaited me? The autumn leaves crunched under my tires as I pulled into the circular driveway, the sound abnormally loud in the quiet evening. I noticed my younger sister Brianna's car immediately. It was hard to miss. A pearl white Mercedes C-Class, only 2 years old, a gift from our parents for her 25th birthday. I remembered my 25th birthday. I had gotten a card with $50 in it and a lecture about fiscal responsibility. The Mercedes was parked at an angle, taking up more space than necessary, just like Brianna had always taken up more space in our parents' lives than she deserved. Next to it sat Brandon's black SUV, a massive Range Rover that he loved to brag about, even though everyone knew his parents had co-signed the loan. Brandon Morrison came from money, though not as much money as he liked people to believe. He worked in commercial real estate, or at least that's what he called it. Mostly, he seemed to network at golf courses and expensive restaurants, living off commissions that were few and far between. I turned off my engine and sat for a moment, my hands still gripping the steering wheel. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to restart the car and leave. This wasn't going to be good. You don't call an emergency family meeting on a Thursday evening with everyone already assembled unless something was wrong. But more than that, something about the way they had arranged their cars, the way the house was lit up with every lamp on in the living room, felt staged, orchestrated. I checked my phone one more time. The text from my mother had been sent 2 hours ago. Family emergency. Come to the house immediately. Don't be late. No explanation. No details. Just a summons as if I were an employee being called into the principal's office rather than a daughter being asked to help with a family crisis. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my purse and stepped out of my car. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from someone's fireplace and the earthy smell of fallen leaves. Normally, I loved autumn. It was my favorite season. But tonight, the chill in the air felt ominous, like the world itself was warning me about what was coming. I walked up the brick pathway past the flower beds my mother fussed over endlessly. The chrysanthemums were in full bloom, deep purple and bright yellow, arranged in a pattern that probably had some meaning in garden design magazines. Everything about this house was designed for show, for the neighbors, for the Christmas tour of homes my mother participated in every year. Nothing was just for us, just for family, just because it brought joy. The front door was a heavy oak thing with a beveled glass window and a brass knocker that was polished weekly by the cleaning service. I didn't knock. This was technically still my childhood home, even though I hadn't lived here in over a decade. I used my key, the one they had never asked for, back, probably because they liked having the option to summon me whenever they needed something. The moment I stepped through the front door into the marble foyer, I knew this wasn't about an emergency at all. The house was too quiet, too still. If this were a real emergency, there would be panic movement, urgent voices. Instead, the air was thick with tension and anticipation, like everyone had been waiting for me to arrive so the show could begin. I could see directly into the living room from the foyer, and what I saw confirmed my worst suspicions. The living room was staged like a courtroom, every person positioned deliberately, every element of the scene carefully arranged for maximum impact. My father, Robert Vance, stood near the fireplace, his favorite power position in the house. He always stood there when he wanted to feel important, to look authoritative. The fireplace was one of those grand things with a marble mantel and an ornate mirror above it that reflected the crystal chandelier hanging in the center of the room. His arms were crossed over his chest, his shoulders squared his face, set in that stern expression he reserved for business negotiations and disappointing his daughters. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, even though it was evening, the charcoal gray one with the subtle pinstripe that he thought made him look distinguished. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, every silver strand in place. At 62, Robert Vance still carried himself like the successful businessman he believed himself to be, even though I knew from his repeated requests for loans that his success was more image than substance. My mother, Martha, sat perched on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, the one she had custom-ordered from some boutique furniture store in Manhattan and had reupholstered twice because she couldn't decide on the exact shade of cream she wanted. She was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, but her eyes weren't red or swollen. The tissue was a prop, I realized with a sinking feeling. She was already setting the stage for the guilt trip that was coming. At 59, my mother was still an attractive woman, carefully maintained through regular appointments at the salon, the dermatologist, the personal trainer. She was wearing a cashmere sweater set in pale blue and her pearls because Martha Vance never received guests, even family, without her pearls. Her blonde hair maintained by expensive highlights to hide, the gray was styled in soft waves around her face. She looked like she had stepped out of a country club catalog. Brianna lounged in the armchair near the window, the Queen Anne chair that had always been considered the best seat in the room. Of course she had claimed it. Brianna had always claimed the best of everything. At 26, my younger sister was beautiful in that effortless way that had always come so easily to her. Long, dark hair that she had inherited from our father's side of the family, big brown eyes, delicate features that photographs loved. She was wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a silk blouse that I recognized from a boutique I could no longer afford to shop at, despite my success, simply because I had other priorities. Her engagement ring caught the light from the chandelier, a massive diamond that Brandon had somehow managed to afford, probably with help from his parents. She wasn't dabbing at any tears. Instead, she looked almost triumphant, a small smile playing at the corners of her perfectly glossed lips. Brandon stood behind her, his hand possessively on her shoulder, looking uncomfortable but trying to hide it. At 28, Brandon was handsome in a generic way, the kind of good-looking that came from good genes and expensive grooming rather than any particular character in his features. Tall, athletic build maintained by a gym membership he actually used, sandy blonde hair styled with product-wearing casual expensive clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that screamed, "I summer in the Hamptons." His hand on Brianna's shoulder was meant to show unity, I supposed, but his eyes kept darting around the room like he wanted to be anywhere but here. I stood in the doorway between the foyer and the living room, my designer handbag still clutched in my hand like a shield, and I waited. I had learned long ago that in this family, the first person to speak was often the first person to lose. So I waited. My face carefully neutral, my body language deliberately relaxed, even though my heart was pounding. Eleanor. My father began using my full name the way he always did when he wanted to establish dominance. Sit down. We need to discuss something important. I remained standing near the doorway, my designer handbag still clutched in my hand. Something in his tone made every muscle in my body tense. What's going on? Brianna spoke up first, her voice taking on that whiny quality I had heard my entire life whenever she wanted something. My wedding is in 3 months, Ellie. 3 months. And Mom and Dad have been so generous, but you know how expensive weddings are these days. I looked at my parents. My mother was nodding vigorously, and my father's jaw was set. The budget has gotten out of hand, he said flatly. We've already committed $50,000, but Brianna deserves the wedding of her dreams. She's only getting married once. Unlike me, I thought bitterly. Unlike me, who had a small courthouse wedding 5 years ago that they barely attended because it wasn't good enough for the Vance family image. Unlike me, who paid for my own divorce attorney when that marriage crumbled under the weight of my ex-husband's infidelity. "We need you to contribute," my mother said, her voice taking on that pleading tone that had manipulated me countless times before. "Just $150,000. You can afford it, Eleanor. We know how successful your consulting firm has become." The number hit me like a physical blow. $150,000 for my sister's wedding. My sister who had never held a job for more than 6 months. My sister who lived rent-free in a condo my parents owned. My sister who had gotten a brand new car for her 21st birthday while I had driven a used Honda Civic I bought with money from my part-time job in college. "You're joking," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My father's expression hardened. "We are not joking. This is your sister. This is family, and family helps family." I almost laughed at the irony. Family helps family. Where was that philosophy when I was working 2 jobs to pay for my MBA? Where was that philosophy when I asked them for a small loan to start my business and was told I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet? Where was that philosophy when I spent every holiday being reminded that I was the disappointment, the one who chose career over finding a suitable husband, the one who wasn't as pretty or charming as Brianna? "No," I said simply. The room went silent. Brianna's mouth fell open. My mother gasped. My father's face turned red. "What did you say?" he demanded. I said no. My voice was steadier now. "I won't be paying for Brianna's wedding." Brianna shot up from her chair. "Are you serious right now? After everything Mom and Dad have done for you? After they raised you and gave you everything?" Something inside me snapped. 28 years of being the responsible one. The one who never asked for anything. The one who was supposed to be grateful just for existing in their perfect family came rushing to the surface. "Everything," I repeated. "They gave me everything, Brianna. They paid for your entire college education while I took out loans. They bought you a car, an apartment. They've been funding your lifestyle for years. What exactly did they give me besides criticism and expectations?" "How dare you?" my mother hissed. "After we clothed you and fed you and put a roof over your head." "That's called being a parent," I shot back. "That's the bare minimum of what you're supposed to do, and I've more than paid you back. Who do you think paid off the second mortgage on this house 2 years ago? Who do you think bailed Dad out when his investment went south? Who do you think has been sending you money every single month for the past 3 years? The silence that followed was deafening. I had never spoken to them like this before. I had always been the good daughter, the quiet one, the one who swallowed her resentment and wrote the checks and kept the peace. My father's voice was ice. "Eleanor, if you don't do this for your sister, if you don't step up and be part of this family, then you won't be part of this family at all. Do you understand me? We will cut you off completely." I looked at each of them, my father with his ultimatum, my mother with her manipulative tears, Brianna with her entitled smirk, Brandon with his uncomfortable shifting, clearly wanting to be anywhere but here. Then I did something I had never done before. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and held the screen up for all of them to see. "Last week," I said, my voice calm and controlled, "my firm closed a $3 million contract with a Fortune 500 company. My personal profit from that deal alone is over $1 million. So when you ask me if I can afford $150,000 for Brianna's wedding, the answer is yes. Absolutely, I can afford it." I watched their faces light up with greed and satisfaction. Then I locked my phone and put it back in my purse. "But I'm not going to pay it, not a single cent." The explosion was immediate. Brianna started screaming. My mother started crying real tears now. My father's face turned purple with rage. I turned toward the door. "If you walk out that door," my father roared, "you are no longer my daughter?" I paused with my hands on the doorknob and looked back at them one last time. "You know what? You're right. I'm not your daughter. I haven't been your daughter in a long time. I've been your piggy bank, your safety net, your backup plan. But I'm done with that role." "You'll regret this," my father shouted as I opened the door. I stepped out into the cool October evening and took a deep breath of freedom. "No," I said quietly, more to myself than to them. "You're the ones who are going to regret this." I drove home to my downtown loft with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had just cut off my entire family. The family I had spent my whole life trying to please, trying to prove myself to trying to earn love from. And instead of feeling devastated, I felt lighter than I had in years. That lightness lasted exactly 12 hours. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone exploding with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. But none of them were from my parents. They were from aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. People I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly very concerned about my well-being and very eager to tell me what a terrible person I was. I scrolled through the messages with growing horror. Then I checked social media and felt my stomach drop. Brianna had posted a long, carefully crafted statement on her Facebook page, complete with childhood photos of the two of us. In the post, she painted herself as the victim of a cruel, jealous older sister who refused to help with her wedding out of spite. She talked about how hard our parents had worked to give us both good lives, how they had always treated us equally, and how I had become greedy and selfish since starting my business. She even managed to work in a few tears-inducing lines about how all she wanted was a simple wedding to celebrate her love with Brandon, but her own sister wanted to ruin her special day. The post had been shared hundreds of times. The comments were brutal. People I had known my entire life were calling me heartless, cruel, selfish. Family members were weighing in with their own stories about what a difficult child I had been, how I had always been jealous of Brianna, how money had changed me. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, feeling like I was watching my reputation being demolished in real time. Part of me wanted to respond to tell my side of the story to defend myself. But another part of me, the part that had spent years in therapy learning about toxic family dynamics, knew that engaging would only make it worse. Instead, I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every comment, every share. Then I blocked my parents' numbers, blocked Brianna and Brandon on all social media platforms, and blocked every family member who had sent me a hateful message. Then I wrote one post of my own. For those who have reached out with concern, thank you. For those who have chosen to believe a one-sided story without hearing mine, that's your choice. I will say this, once I have never been treated as an equal in my family. I have been expected to give without receiving, to support without being supported, and to be grateful for the privilege of being used. I made a choice to stop that pattern. If that makes me the villain in someone else's story, I can live with that. Comments on this post are disabled. This is the only statement I will make. Then I turned off my phone and went to work. My business partner, David Chin, took one look at me when I walked into the office and immediately ushered me into the conference room. David and I had started our consulting firm together 3 years ago, and he had become one of my closest friends. "Talk to me," he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. I told him everything. The meeting, the ultimatum, the social media explosion. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker by the minute. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You did the right thing." I felt tears prick my eyes. Then why do I feel so terrible? "Because breaking free from toxic people hurts, even when you know it's necessary," he said gently. "But Ellie, I've known you for 5 years. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion, and every time I asked why you were pushing so hard, you said it was because you had to prove yourself. To who? To your family. And every time you closed a big deal, every time we hit a major milestone, instead of celebrating, you seemed stressed about something. Now I know why. You were wondering how much they were going to ask you for next." He was right. I had been living my entire life on a hamster wheel, running faster and faster, trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given. "I think you should talk to Sarah," David said. Sarah Miller was our corporate attorney, but she also did some family law work. What they're doing, the social media posts, the harassment from family members that might constitute defamation. At the very least, you should document everything in case this escalates. I hadn't even considered that it might escalate further. That was naive of me. 2 days later, Brianna showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting with a potential client when my assistant frantically knocked on the conference room door. "Ellie, I'm so sorry, but there's a situation in the lobby." I excused myself and walked out to find Brianna standing in the middle of our office lobby, her face red and blotchy from crying, her voice raised loud enough for everyone on the floor to hear. "You selfish bitch!" she screamed when she saw me. You're ruining my life. All I wanted was one thing, and you couldn't even do that for me. What kind of sister are you? I could feel every eye in the office on us. My employees had frozen at their desks. The potential client had followed me out of the conference room and was watching with wide eyes. I kept my voice calm and professional. Brianna, you need to leave. Now. I'm not going anywhere until you agree to pay for my wedding. Mom and Dad are beside themselves. Do you know Mom's been so upset she had to go to the hospital? Do you want to kill our mother? I'm calling security, I said, walking toward the reception desk. Brianna followed me, still screaming. You think you're so much better than us because you have money now. You think you can just abandon your family? Well, everyone knows what you really are. Everyone knows you're just a cold, heartless bitch who cares more about money than her own blood. The security guard had arrived and was trying to escort Brianna out, but she was making a scene crying and screaming about what a terrible person I was. Several people had their phones out recording the whole thing. By the time she was finally removed from the building, I was shaking. The potential client had quietly left without signing the contract. My employees were whispering among themselves. And I absolutely knew that Brianna had done this intentionally. She wanted to hurt me where it would matter most, my professional reputation. David found me in my office sitting at my desk with my head in my hands. Sarah's downstairs getting the security footage, he said. We're filing for a restraining order today. And Ellie, I want you to go home. Take a few days. We'll handle things here. I can't just leave, I protested. We have the Morrison deal closing next week, and the Henderson proposal is due on Friday. And we have a team of competent people who can handle it, David said firmly. You need to take care of yourself right now. This isn't just about business. This is about your safety and your well-being. I wanted to argue, but the truth was I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. The constant barrage of messages, the social media attacks, the family members calling me at all hours, and now this. I felt like I was under siege. That evening, I met with Sarah Miller at her office downtown. She had already compiled a thick folder of evidence, screenshots of Brianna's social media posts, recordings of the threatening voicemails from various family members, the security footage from my office, and witness statements from my employees about Brianna's behavior. This is clear-cut harassment, Sarah said, flipping through the documentation. We can get a temporary restraining order issued by tomorrow morning. And honestly, Ellie, I think we should consider a defamation suit. The things your sister posted are provably false and they've damaged your professional reputation. I just want it to stop, I said tiredly. I don't want to hurt them. I just want them to leave me alone. Sarah looked at me with sympathy. I understand. But sometimes the only way to make people like this stop is to show them that there are consequences for their actions. They're counting on you backing down because you're afraid of being the bad guy. But you're not the bad guy here, Ellie. You're the victim. Victim. The word sat heavy in my chest. I had never thought of myself as a victim. I had always been the strong one, the capable one, the one who could handle anything. But looking at the evidence spread across Sarah's desk, I couldn't deny it anymore. I had been victimized by my own family for years, and I had let it happen because I was afraid that standing up for myself would mean losing them. Now I had lost them anyway, but on my own terms. File the restraining order, I said, and draw up the defamation suit. I'm done being nice. The restraining order was granted the next day. Brianna was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my office. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with the security footage of her screaming in my workplace. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. I should have known my parents wouldn't take this lying down. The call came from my mother's number, but when I answered, having forgotten, I hadn't yet blocked this particular hospital's number. It was a nurse on the line. Is this Eleanor Vance? I'm calling from Presbyterian Hospital. Your mother, Martha Vance, was admitted this evening. She's been asking for you. My heart seized. What happened? Is she okay? She had what appears to be a cardiac episode. She's stable now, but she's very upset and asking for her daughter. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital, my mind racing. Was this real? Was my mother actually sick, or was this another manipulation? But what if it was real and I didn't go? What if something happened to her, and the last time we spoke was that horrible night in their living room? When I got to her room, my father was there sitting in the chair by her bed. My mother was propped up on pillows, looking pale and weak, an oxygen tube in her nose. Eleanor, she said weakly when she saw me. You came. Of course I came, Mom. What happened? The stress, my father said sharply. The stress of what you've done to this family. Your mother couldn't take it. The doctor said it was stress-induced angina. I looked at my mother's face, searching for signs of genuine illness or manipulation. She looked tired, certainly, but there was something in her eyes. That calculating look I had seen so many times before. Mom, are you really sick? I asked quietly. How can you even ask that? My father demanded. She's in a hospital bed. I'm asking because I need to know if this is real or if this is another attempt to manipulate me into doing what you want. My mother's face crumpled. How can you be so cruel? I'm your mother. I raised you. And this is how you treat me. This is why I'm in this bed. The stress of having such an ungrateful daughter. And there it was. Even in a hospital bed, even when I was genuinely concerned, it was still about control. Still about making me feel guilty. Still about punishing me for having boundaries. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. But I'm not going to participate in this anymore. If you're genuinely ill, I hope you recover, but using your health as a weapon to manipulate me is not going to work. Get out, my father said coldly. If you're not going to help your mother, then get out. I left the hospital room and drove home through blurry tears, not because I was sad, but because I was angry. Angry that even now, even when they were supposed to be vulnerable, they were still playing games, still trying to control me. The next day, Sarah called me with news. Your father has been spreading rumors about your company to his business contacts. We've had 3 clients call us today asking about concerns they've heard about your firm's financial stability. He's trying to destroy my business, I said flatly. Yes, Sarah confirmed. And that's tortious interference with business relationships. We can sue him for that, too. I thought about my father with his prestigious connections and his old boys network. I thought about how he had always wielded his influence like a weapon, how he had taught me that power was about who you knew and what you could take from people. Do it, I said. I'm done letting them think they can do whatever they want without consequences. But my family wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. It was Brandon Brianna's fiancé who made the next move. He reached out through a mutual friend asking if we could meet to talk. The friend swore that Brandon just wanted to apologize to try to smooth things over. Against my better judgment, and with Sarah's insistence that the meeting be recorded and that she be present, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory. Brandon showed up looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. He ordered a coffee and sat down across from me and Sarah. Look, Ellie, he began. I know things have gotten out of hand. I know your family has been pushing hard, and I know Brianna shouldn't have come to your office like that. That's putting it mildly, Sarah interjected. Brandon ignored her. The thing is, we're in a really tough spot. The wedding is coming up, and we've already put deposits down on things. Without your help, we're going to have to cancel or seriously downgrade, and that's going to be humiliating for Brianna. That's not my problem, I said. His expression hardened slightly. I think you should reconsider. You see, I know some things about your business. Things that maybe your clients wouldn't want to know. I felt Sarah stiffen beside me. Are you threatening my client, Mr. Morrison? Brandon held up his hands. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just saying it would be a shame if certain information got out. Information about how you got some of your initial contracts. Information about relationships with clients that might not be entirely professional. I stared at him. I have no idea what you're talking about. Every contract I've ever won was earned through hard work and merit. That's your story, Brandon said. But is it everyone's story? See, your dad has been talking to people, and people talk, and sometimes stories get started. True or not, they can really hurt a business. This wasn't just a threat. This was extortion, and he was stupid enough to do it in front of my lawyer. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, I want to be very clear about what just happened here. You just attempted to extort money from my client by threatening to spread false information about her business. This conversation has been recorded with both audio and video. You've just committed a serious crime. Brandon's face went white. I wasn't. You absolutely were, I said, standing up. And now you're going to go back to Brianna and my parents, and you're going to tell them that their plan failed. Tell them that if they continue to harass me, interfere with my business, or spread lies about me, I will prosecute all of you to the fullest extent of the law. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling powerful for the first time in weeks. They had tried every manipulation tactic in the book, and I had stood firm against every single one. 2 days later, Sarah filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Brianna Brandon and my parents. The charges included defamation, harassment, tortious interference with business relationships, and attempted extortion. The case was airtight. We had evidence of everything: the social media posts, the threatening messages, the office incident, the attempted extortion, my father's interference with my business relationships, and even medical records proving that my mother's cardiac episode had been a mild anxiety attack rather than anything serious. When the news of the lawsuit hit, it exploded. A local business reporter picked up the story, fascinated by the angle of a successful businesswoman having to sue her own family. The article painted me in a sympathetic light, detailing how I had built my firm from nothing while being expected to financially support my extended family. The public response was overwhelmingly in my favor. Other people started sharing their own stories of toxic family dynamics and financial abuse. I received hundreds of messages of support from complete strangers who had been through similar situations. My business, rather than being hurt by all the drama, actually grew. The publicity brought us new clients who admired my courage in standing up for myself. The contracts started rolling in faster than David and I could handle them. But the real victory came 3 months later at the courthouse. The hearing was held in a civil courtroom on a cold February morning. My entire family was there: my parents, Brianna Brandon, and a lawyer they had collectively hired who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the hearing progressed. Sarah was brilliant. She presented each piece of evidence methodically, building an irrefutable case. She had witnesses, my employees, who testified about Brianna's behavior at the office, business associates, who testified about my father's interference, experts, who analyzed the social media posts and proved they were defamatory. Then it was my turn to testify. I sat in the witness box and told my story. All of it. I talked about growing up, always feeling like I wasn't good enough, about paying my own way through school, while Brianna got everything handed to her, about the years of being expected to provide financial support, with no appreciation or reciprocation, about the emotional manipulation and the constant criticism. I talked about the night they gave me the ultimatum, about how they valued me only as a source of money, about how they tried to destroy my business and reputation when I finally said no. My voice shook when I talked about my mother's fake hospital emergency. It cracked when I described finding out my father was spreading lies about me to my professional contacts. But I kept going because this was my truth and it deserved to be heard. When I finished, I looked at my family. My mother was crying, but this time I think they might have been real tears. My father looked older, somehow diminished. Brianna's face was a mask of fury. Brandon looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Their lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive and cruel, as someone who had abandoned her family out of greed. But every argument fell flat against the mountain of evidence Sarah had presented. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to everything. Then she took off her glasses and looked directly at my parents. "I have presided over many cases in my career," she said, "but this is one of the most disturbing examples of family dysfunction I have seen. A family should be a source of support and love. What you have created is a toxic environment where one child was valued only for what she could provide financially. Your actions after Ms. Vance set reasonable boundaries were vindictive, cruel, and in some cases criminal." She ruled in my favor on every count. Brianna and Brandon were ordered to pay substantial damages for the harassment and attempted extortion. My parents were ordered to pay damages for defamation and interference with my business, along with a formal public apology to be published in the local newspaper. The restraining orders were made permanent. As we left the courtroom, my father tried one last time. "Eleanor, please, can't we talk about this? We're family." I stopped and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who was supposed to protect me, to support me, to love me unconditionally. This man who had only ever seen me as a resource to be used. "No," I said simply. "We're not family. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't demand that love be purchased with money. Family doesn't try to destroy you when you refuse to be used anymore." "You're going to regret this," he said, his voice shaking with anger or maybe fear. "No," I said again. "I don't think I will, but I think you might. I think someday you're going to realize what you lost and it's going to hurt. And when that day comes, I won't be there to comfort you. I won't be there at all." I walked away and didn't look back. The months that followed were transformative. Without the constant drain of my family's demands and manipulation, I felt like I could finally breathe. My business continued to thrive. David and I hired more staff, took on bigger projects, and won awards for our innovative work. But more importantly, I built a new family. Not one based on blood or obligation, but on genuine connection and mutual support. David and his wife Rachel had me over for dinner every Sunday. Their kids started calling me Aunt Ellie. My friend Olivia, who had stood by me through the entire ordeal, became more like a sister than Brianna had ever been. I joined a support group for people who had cut contact with toxic families and found a community of people who understood what I had been through. I started dating again, something I had avoided for years because I was always too busy working to please my family. I met Marcus at a charity event, a kind, successful man who respected my boundaries and celebrated my successes instead of trying to profit from them. He had his own story of breaking free from a toxic family, and we bonded over our shared experiences. 6 months after the lawsuit, the public apology from my parents appeared in the newspaper as ordered by the court. It was brief and clearly written by their lawyer, but it was there in black and white, an admission that they had treated me unfairly and damaged my reputation unjustly. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt sad for what could have been if they had been capable of loving me for who I was instead of what I could provide. A year after I walked out of my parents' house, my company was featured in a major business magazine as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. The article mentioned my background, including my legal battle with my family, but focused primarily on my business acumen and innovative approach to consulting. The day the article came out, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from my mother. "I read the article. I'm proud of you." I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me, the little girl who had always craved her mother's approval, wanted to respond, wanted to believe that maybe now finally things could be different. But I had learned my lesson. I had learned that toxic people don't change just because you succeed. They don't suddenly become healthy and supportive just because time has passed. And most importantly, I had learned that I didn't need their approval to be happy. I deleted the message and blocked the number. That evening, I had dinner with Marcus, David, Rachel, and Olivia at my favorite restaurant. We laughed and talked and made plans for the future. As I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life and who I had chosen in return, I realized something profound. This was my family now. These people who celebrated my victories without asking what was in it for them, who supported me through challenges without keeping score, who loved me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. 2 years after that fateful night when I refused to pay for Brianna's wedding, my life looked completely different. My company had expanded to multiple cities. Marcus and I had moved in together into a beautiful home we had chosen and decorated according to our own tastes, not anyone else's expectations. I had published a book about toxic family dynamics and financial abuse that became a bestseller and helped thousands of people recognize and escape similar situations. I occasionally heard updates about my family through the grapevine. Brianna had eventually had her wedding, though it was much smaller than the extravagant affair she had planned. She and Brandon were still together, though rumors suggested things were rocky. My parents had downsized their house, whether due to financial pressures or simply because they didn't need all that space anymore. I didn't know or care. Some people thought I should feel guilty. Some people thought I should forgive and reconcile. But I had learned something crucial during my journey. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I had forgiven my family for what they did not, for their sake, but for mine. I had released the anger and the hurt because carrying it was exhausting. But forgiveness didn't mean inviting them back into my life to repeat the same patterns. I had learned to value myself not based on what I could provide for others, but based on my inherent worth as a human being. I had learned that saying no was not selfish, it was self-preservation. I had learned that blood doesn't make you family love and respect do. On a sunny spring afternoon, Marcus and I got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our chosen family. There were no ultimatums, no demands, no keeping score. Just love freely given and freely received. As I stood there, holding Marcus's hands and looking into his eyes, I thought about how different this moment was from my first wedding. That day, I had been so anxious about what my family thought about whether the ceremony was good enough, about whether I was making the right choice. Today, I felt nothing but peace and joy. David gave a toast at the reception. "I've known Ellie for years," he said, raising his glass. "And I've watched her transform from someone who was constantly trying to prove her worth to someone who knows her worth. That's the real triumph. Not the business success, not winning the lawsuit, but learning that she deserves to be loved without conditions and without paying for the privilege." Everyone cheered, and I felt tears of genuine happiness sliding down my cheeks. That night, as Marcus and I slow danced under strings of lights while our friends and chosen family celebrated around us, someone approached me. It was Rachel, David's wife. "There's someone here who wants to talk to you," she said quietly. "It's your aunt, your mother's sister. She's been standing outside for the past hour working up the courage to come in. She says she has something important to tell you." My first instinct was to say no, but Rachel saw the conflict on my face. "I talked to her briefly," Rachel said. "She's not here to make excuses for your parents or to try to manipulate you. She says she's here to apologize and to tell you something she thinks you deserve to know. It's your choice, but I think you should at least hear her out." I found my Aunt Linda standing near the garden entrance looking nervous and older than I remembered. We hadn't spoken since before the lawsuit. She had been one of the many family members who had sent me angry messages after Brianna's social media post. "Eleanor," she said when she saw me, "thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I promise I won't take much of your time. I just needed to tell you something that's been weighing on my conscience." I crossed my arms, maintaining a polite distance. "I'm listening." Aunt Linda took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. A real one. When Brianna posted all those things about you, I didn't question it. I just believed her because she's family, and that's what I thought family was supposed to do. But after the lawsuit, after everything came out in court, I realized how wrong I was. How wrong we all were." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "Your mother is my sister, and I love her. But Eleanor, I've watched her treat you differently than Brianna your entire life, and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place, that every parent has their reasons. But the truth is, what they did to you was abuse. Financial abuse, emotional abuse. And I stood by and let it happen. I'm so sorry." I felt something loosen in my chest. An apology. A real one with accountability and acknowledgement. It didn't change the past, but it mattered. "There's something else," Aunt Linda continued. "Something I think you should know. Your grandmother, my mother, before she passed away 10 years ago, she left you something. A trust fund. It was substantial, about $200,000. She specified in her will that it was to go directly to you on your 25th birthday. I stared at her. "I never received anything like that. I was 25 7 years ago." "I know." Aunt Linda looked ashamed. "Your father was the executor of the will. He told everyone you had received it. But after the lawsuit, when I started questioning things, I looked into it. Eleanor, he never gave it to you. He and your mother used it to pay off debts to fund Brianna's lifestyle. They stole your inheritance." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. Money that could have helped me start my business years earlier, money that was meant for me from a grandmother who had actually loved me. Stolen by my own parents. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice tight. "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because there's still time to do something about it legally if you want to. I have copies of the original will and bank statements showing where the money went. I'll testify if you need me to." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "It's all in here." I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me, for being honest." "I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you when you were younger. I'm sorry I believed the lies, and I'm sorry I sent you those horrible messages. You didn't deserve any of it." We stood in silence for a moment. Then Aunt Linda said, "I don't expect you to forgive me or to want a relationship with me. I just wanted you to have the truth and to know that at least one person in that family sees you for who you really are, a remarkable woman who deserved so much better than what we gave you." She started to leave, but I called after her. "Aunt Linda." She turned back. "Thank you. Really, this means more than you know." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked away. I stood there holding the envelope, processing this new information. Marcus found me a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me. "They stole from me," I said, showing him the envelope. "My grandmother left me money and my parents stole it." Marcus's jaw clenched. What do you want to do? I thought about it. I thought about filing another lawsuit, about dragging them back to court, about making them pay for this new betrayal. And then I thought about my wedding reception happening just beyond the garden, about the people inside who loved me, about the life I had built, despite everything they had tried to take from me. Nothing, I said finally. I'm not going to do anything. Marcus looked surprised. Are you sure? I'm sure. They already lost the lawsuit. They already had to publicly apologize. They're already living with the consequences of their choices. Filing another lawsuit would mean more time in court, more energy spent on them, more of my life devoted to people who don't deserve it. I looked up at him. They took that money from me, but they can't take away what I've built. They can't take away my success, my happiness, or this moment. And I'm not going to let them take one more second of my time. Marcus smiled and kissed my forehead. You're incredible, you know that. We walked back into the reception together. As we rejoined our celebration, I handed the envelope to Sarah, who was dancing with her husband. File this somewhere safe, I told her, just in case, but I'm not pursuing it right now. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Whatever you want, Ellie, it's your choice. That was the key word. Choice. For so many years, I had felt like I had no choice but to comply with my family's demands to be what they wanted me to be, to pay what they wanted me to pay. But I had learned that I always had a choice. The consequences of choosing myself had been painful, but they had also been liberating. The rest of the evening was pure joy. We danced until my feet hurt. We laughed until my sides ached. We celebrated not just a wedding, but a life reclaimed, a future embraced, a woman who had learned to value herself. As the night wound down and guests started to leave, Olivia pulled me aside. I'm so proud of you, she said. Do you remember 3 years ago when you first told me about your family? You were so convinced that you were the problem, that if you just tried harder or gave more, they would love you the way you needed to be loved. I remembered thinking that I was defective somehow, that there was something wrong with me that made me unworthy of unconditional love. Look at you now, Olivia continued. You've built an empire. You've found real love. You've created a family that actually values you. And you did it all by having the courage to walk away from people who were destroying you. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted. The best things usually are, she said, hugging me tight. 3 years after that wedding, I was invited to speak at a conference for entrepreneurs who had overcome adversity. I almost declined. I had spent years building my new life, and part of me wanted to leave the past in the past. But then I thought about all the people who might be in situations similar to what I had experienced. People who needed to hear that it was possible to break free and thrive. Standing on that stage in front of hundreds of people, I told my story. Not for revenge or vindication, but to offer hope. I want to be clear about something, I said near the end of my speech. Cutting off my family was not my first choice. It was my last resort after years of trying everything else. I tried setting boundaries. I tried honest conversations. I tried reducing contact. I tried conditional relationship, where I would engage only if they treated me with respect. None of it worked because they didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted access to my resources. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, seeing recognition and pain in so many eyes. The hardest part wasn't leaving. The hardest part was accepting that I couldn't fix them. I couldn't love them enough to make them treat me better. I couldn't succeed enough to earn their genuine pride. I couldn't give enough to satisfy their demands. The only thing I could control was myself, my boundaries, and my choice to stop participating in my own mistreatment. After the speech, dozens of people came up to me with their own stories. Some were still trapped in toxic family dynamics, afraid to leave. Others had already made the break and were dealing with the aftermath. I listened to each one, offered what guidance I could, and reminded them that they deserved better. One young woman, probably in her mid-20s, waited until everyone else had gone. My parents are threatening to disown me if I don't give them $50,000 for my brother's legal fees, she said, her voice shaking. He got arrested for fraud, and they think it's my responsibility to bail him out because I'm the successful one. I'm so scared of losing them, but I worked so hard for my money. I don't know what to do. I looked at this young woman, seeing my younger self in her frightened eyes, and I took her hands. Let me ask you something. If you give them this money, will that be the last time they ask? She shook her head slowly. Probably not. And if you say no and they disown you, will you actually be losing something valuable, or will you be losing the illusion of something you never really had? Tears spilled down her cheeks. The illusion, she whispered. Then you already know your answer, I said gently. It's going to hurt either way, but one path leads to temporary pain and eventual freedom. The other leads to a lifetime of being used and never being enough. Choose the pain that leads to growth, not the pain that leads to more of the same. She hugged me crying into my shoulder, and I held her the way I wished someone had held me all those years ago when I was drowning in guilt and fear. 5 years after I walked out of my parents' house, I received a letter. It came to my office forwarded through several addresses, and the return address was a hospice facility. My father was dying. I sat at my desk holding the letter, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions. The letter was from a hospice social worker informing me that Robert Vance had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and had weeks, maybe days left. He had asked to see me. Marcus found me that evening still sitting with the unopened second page of the letter in my hands. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks I should go, that I'll regret it if I don't, that maybe he wants to apologize to make things right before he dies. And the other part? The other part remembers every time he chose to hurt me, every time he chose Brianna over me, every time he tried to destroy what I built. The other part knows that people don't usually have deathbed transformations in real life, that he probably just wants something from me one last time." "What does your gut tell you?" Marcus asked. I closed my eyes and really listened to my instincts, that voice I had learned to trust over the past 5 years. "It tells me that I don't owe him anything, not even a deathbed visit, that if he wanted a relationship with me, he had decades to build one. He chose not to." "Then you have your answer," Marcus said. I wrote a brief response to the hospice social worker, declining to visit but wishing my father peace in his final days. I didn't write to him directly. There was nothing left to say. He died 2 weeks later. I didn't attend the funeral. Brianna sent me a vicious message calling me heartless and cruel for not coming to say goodbye to our father. I deleted it without responding. But I did grieve. Not for the father I had, but for the father I should have had. I grieved for the childhood I deserved and didn't get. I grieved for the unconditional love that should have been my birthright but never was. I let myself feel the sadness and the loss, and then I let it go. My mother survived my father by 3 years. I heard through Aunt Linda, who had become a regular presence in my life, that she had moved in with Brianna, that the relationship was strained, that Martha had become difficult and demanding, and Brianna was struggling with the reality of being the one responsible for an aging parent's care and expectations. I felt a bitter sort of irony in that. Brianna had spent her whole life being the favored child, but in the end, she was stuck with the burden she had always expected me to carry. When my mother died, Aunt Linda called me personally. "Your mother asked for you at the end," she said gently. "She said she was sorry." "Did she say what she was sorry for?" I asked. There was a long pause. "No, just that she was sorry." I thanked Aunt Linda for letting me know and hung up. A blanket apology with no specifics, no accountability, no real acknowledgement of what she had done. Even in death, my mother couldn't quite manage to fully see me. I didn't attend her funeral either. I had made my peace with my parents long ago, not by reconciling with them, but by accepting that they were who they were and that I couldn't change them. I could only change how I responded to them. Now, 10 years after that fateful night when I refused to pay for Brianna's wedding, I sit in my home office looking at a life that exceeded every dream I ever had. My company has offices in 15 cities. My book has been translated into 20 languages. Marcus and I have 2 beautiful children who are growing up knowing they are loved unconditionally, knowing their worth isn't tied to what they can provide. David is still my business partner and one of my dearest friends. Olivia is my children's godmother. Aunt Linda comes to every family gathering, a real aunt who celebrates our successes and supports us through our challenges. We have built something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. People sometimes ask me if I regret my decision, if I wish I had tried harder to maintain the relationship with my family. And my answer is always the same no, not even for a moment. Because breaking free from my toxic family didn't just save my bank account or my business, it saved my life. It allowed me to become the person I was always meant to be, unburdened by guilt and obligation and the constant need to prove my worth. I learned that love isn't supposed to hurt, family isn't supposed to be transactional, and you don't owe anyone access to your life just because you share DNA. The little girl who grew up feeling like she was never enough finally realized the truth: she was always enough. The problem was never with her. It was with people who couldn't see her value because they were too busy calculating her utility. Today, when my daughter asks me what the most important thing I ever did was, I don't tell her about building my company or writing my book or any of my professional achievements. I tell her about the night I walked out of my parents' house and chose myself. Sometimes I tell her the bravest thing you can do is disappoint people who never really loved you anyway. Sometimes the most important boundary you'll ever set is the one that protects your peace. And sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, but the one you create. She's too young to fully understand yet, but someday, if she ever needs to make a hard choice between being used and being free, I hope she remembers her mother's story. I hope she remembers that she has the strength to choose herself. I hope she remembers that she deserves love that doesn't cost her everything she is. And if she's lucky, she'll never need to use that strength. Because Marcus and I are building something different for our children. We're creating a family where love is freely given, where success is celebrated without jealousy, where help is offered without strings attached, where no one has to earn their place at the table. That's my real victory, not winning the lawsuit or building the business or proving everyone wrong. My real victory is breaking the cycle. It's ensuring that my children will never know what it feels like to be valued only for what they can provide. It's teaching them that family is about love and respect, not obligation and guilt. 10 years ago, I was terrified that walking away from my family meant I would end up alone. But I've learned that you're never alone when you surround yourself with people who genuinely care about you. And sometimes being alone is better than being with people who make you feel worthless. As I write this, sitting in my beautiful home with my sleeping children upstairs and my husband reading in the next room, I feel something I never felt in my parents' house: peace. Real, genuine, bone-deep peace. I am enough. I have always been enough, and I don't need anyone's permission or approval to know that anymore. That's what freedom feels like, and it was worth every painful step it took to get here.